Hello, everybody. My name is Devoney and welcome to Engaging Social Media for Emerging Authors. I'm hoping to share some information with you over the next about 25 minutes. And with any luck, you'll come away with some tips and a chance to ask some further questions. So here's my opening pitch about what I'm hoping to accomplish in our time together today. I think so much of the hype around writers on social media focuses on follower numbers, on numbers. But to use an old phrase in a new way, size isn't the only thing that matters. So in this workshop, we'll seek out ways for you to create an engaging social media presence that's right for you, one that specifically connects and reaches out. So not about size, about connection, and that doesn't drain too much energy from your writing time. These are crucial elements of what I'm about to share with you. We know publishers care about how far your reach extends. They ask these questions, and they have some good reasons for it. But I'm more interested in helping you start smaller to find some best fit online communities for your work, because I think those may be just as crucial to your career as an author, and I'll talk about why. And learning how engaging beyond the quantity factor on social media, I think will help you build a better and more committed audience for your writing. So I've highlighted here, emphasized the words that I think are important. Not just size, connecting and reaching out, not draining too much energy, finding the best fit online, and a more committed audience. I think it's important to start by recognizing that social media for emerging authors isn't a one and done thing. It's not like, oh, I created a website, oh, I created a Twitter account, thank gosh, now I'm done. Here I am, I'm an author on social media. I hope you'll think about this as a process rather than a one and done, and consider quality over quantity. This is an ongoing task. That is, some small part of your day, as I'll talk about in a few minutes, should be devoted to connecting on social media. It's about teaching, it's about sharing, learning, listening, and it's training. It requires practice. Some of you are probably already quite expert on some of the platforms that you're engaging on. Others of you either aren't on the platforms or trying to think through which ones work best for your work, and I'll try to talk you through that. But whichever direction you end up going in, I hope you'll recognize that this is important. This is a 21st century way that not only publishers expect, but writers need in order to build audiences for their work. So how do you go about creating your online author identity? I think it's important to say to you that it's okay to start slow and small. You don't have to explode everything everywhere and put all of your energy into this. It really shouldn't be like that. This work is not for everyone. I think there are many good reasons not to want to engage on social media or on particular social media platforms. And those are up to you to figure out, obviously, but I wouldn't push you to a place that you didn't want to be. That would make no sense. You don't have to do it all. You don't have to be on all of them all the time. Again, would not make sense. That said, this takes discipline. For some people, it's a discipline of putting yourself out there, and for others, it's a discipline of taking yourself off of there. I often think Twitter, for example, really rewards people who are constantly on and constantly engaging. It's designed to make you feel always hungry and always like you're missing something. But I think it's really important on Twitter, unless that's your work, unless that's your line of work or something that you're writing about, that you limit your time, that you not get sucked into the very, sort of attention deficit economy of Twitter. So find the parts that you like within social media platforms and work with them. If you're not there out of some kind of joy or enjoyment, I think that's going to show. And I think that it's going to make it harder for you to succeed there. So I hope wherever you go, you try to find a little joy or pleasure in it. So why do it? I've already talked a little bit about this. It's about getting your ideas and your stories heard. And I think writers write because we love writing, but many of us also want that writing to have an audience now or in the future. And being available, findable, active on social media is about building that audience. It's also about support, community, networking, finding your people. So it's about networking, connections. It's about being mentored. It's about mentoring, all of these things. It's about growth. And I do think that for all of the bad rap that social media rightly gets, it can also be a space for growth. And that's what I hope that you will look for as a writer going forward. It's about listening to how your writing is being received by readers and about being a generous reader yourself. I think this can be transformative. As I said, if it's about growth, then it's transformative. So here are some principles that I'd like you to think about as you're moving into this space or deepening your involvement in these spaces. Think of whatever you put out there as like a billboard. Do you want whatever it is you're about to say or share on a billboard? And if you're a more exhibitionist person, this might be a different question from if you're a very reticent person who likes to keep things to yourself. But please be aware that whichever family member drives by whatever billboard is there to see. So you need to be comfortable with having whatever you put on social media seen by that aunt who's especially judgmental, or your mother-in-law, or whoever it is that you imagine when you think, I wouldn't want this on a billboard. Anything you put out there is on a billboard. It's probably an obvious point. The kinds of writing that you do on social media, I think people will say, well, it's just social media and it's not, it's throwaway writing. But I would like for you to be as thoughtful and deliberative about your social media practice as you are about whatever kind of writing it is that you consider craft. I think you can approach this as a kind of mini craft. So it's about talking across, not talking down. In the same way in your writing that you wouldn't want your readers to feel put off by whatever it is you're saying, or uncomfortable, or inappropriately judged, condescended to. You also don't want to do that on social media. And I think this is, maybe there are places where you will feel more of an authority and less of an authority figure as you enter. But please remember that this should be about connecting and talking across. At the same time, for those of you who are very new to this, there may be a learning curve, a steep learning curve, and misunderstandings, and that's okay too. Any kind of thing that you're learning about for the first time is like learning a new genre. So if you've been a fiction writer and you're moving into screenwriting, or you've been a playwright and you're moving into nonfiction, you know that there are new conventions to learn. Same thing with social media. There are conventions to learn. And I think the best way to start is by being a listener and a more reticent participator, especially as you first get going, to try to learn the rules of the culture and the rules of the genre. So, values clarification. Right now, or at some point in the future, I would like for you to think about, what do you believe motivates other writers to use social media? And why might you want to use social media? And ideally, you would answer this and not have these other terms in your mind. But I think that oftentimes we imagine other readers doing this for fame or for writing, for fame or for money or for growing an audience. But I also think there are moments where we think maybe it was for attention, or maybe it's for therapy, or maybe it's acting, maybe it's a persona. All these things can definitely be true. But what I would hope that you would have at the fore, whatever reasons you are putting yourself out there, your profession as a writer and your professionalism should be guiding you. So what you share should be about building your authentic writing, shareable self, and not about tell it to a therapist if you need a therapist, or do something that gets you attention if what you need is attention. This is not a space to behave in a way that would reflect negatively on who you are as a writer. Ideally, there should be a synergy. Ideally, whatever it is that you are in your writing and as an author would also be reflected, reinforced in whatever you are on social media, if that makes sense. So I think it's a good idea too to look at some models, and I'd like to encourage you at some future point to think about a role model writer or two whose social media identity you admire. And I would encourage you to choose someone who's not super famous, not somebody with millions and millions of followers or even hundreds of thousands of followers, but somebody who's maybe a step between whatever you might aspire to one day and where you're starting from. So the person who is moving along at a good pace and building, but hasn't necessarily arrived as a household name, would be a better role model to choose for this exercise. Then I'd encourage you to take a deep dive into how and where that person is findable, what their static content is. We'll talk about that in a moment, and how they are doing social media outreach. So what is their active content? What are they putting out there for others to read and respond to in real time? And I want to encourage you, as you look at those role models, to take a kind of mental snapshot of what they're doing in that space. That is, study it not just for what it's saying, but what it's doing. What are their patterns? What is their content? What is their tone? How does their engagement work? I think these are really important things as you think about who you want to be, to look at people you admire and see how they are doing this successfully already. So static content, being findable. This is the kind of content that doesn't change so quickly and that isn't really happening um, in a moving way in real time. And I think about this as your website, which should be welcoming, which should be navigable. Something with a professional headshot would be a very good idea. If you want to be taken seriously professionally as a writer, having a professional headshot is a great idea. Maybe you can find somebody who's willing to approximate one of those for you, who's a very accomplished photographer. Doesn't have to look like it was done in a studio with all the right lighting and all the right makeup, but to have something that makes you look like you would on the jacket cover of a book. That's what you're going for. Something that you would want to see reflected of yourself on a jacket cover of a book there on your website. I think you should also strive to have in some space available print, audio, and video examples of your writing and speaking, things that you're ready to share, things that you think are your best work, things that are discoverable, that show you as your best as a writer. For some of you, this might involve blogging. We can talk more about that. I think that's probably a more obvious way. Lots of writers keep blogs, and also other kinds of social media we'll discuss in a moment, and any other kinds of assets you might include here, things that would make you findable. Then there's also the active content, the being engaged. And Facebook would be an obvious place in a certain demographic. I would encourage you in Facebook, find your groups. We can certainly imagine what those might be. In my case, I write a great deal on women writers of the 18th and 19th century, and especially on Jane Austen. I know that I need to go find my Jane Austen Facebook groups and engage there and be a part of the community so that when I have something to share, they are already interested in and invested in my being a part of what's there. Twitter, Instagram, even LinkedIn, although we think of that as more of a resume building job searching site, there are ways in which I think LinkedIn could be a building space for an emerging author. Alumni networks, if you graduated from a high school or a college, these are places that you should definitely keep in touch and be engaged in order to share content and ideas going forward. Podcasting, you don't necessarily have to create a podcast, although you certainly could, but to find people who produce podcasts and to let them know that you would be there to talk about what it is you are building, what you're doing, what you're becoming expert at, or the stories that you're telling, the things that you want to reach out with. Make connections to people who podcast. Maybe you do videos, put some things on YouTube that you think are reflections of your best self as a writer. TikTok is not something I do, so I'm gonna have to let somebody else speak to that. But obviously, especially for a certain younger demographic, being findable and successful on TikTok has opened up a lot of doors for communication and furthering one's work. So I think, again, at some future point, I encourage you to take stock. What's the state of your author's social media identity? You can do this by Googling yourself and writer or author. Some of you have more common names, some have less common names. These are going to come up with different results. But you want to know what's there. And are you in the results? If you include your name or the name you write under and writer or author, what comes up? Do you like what you see? Can you find yourself? And how can you create ways to become more findable? This is not only what happens to be there is what you're stuck with. It's a how can you make, over the coming months and years, results that might rise, results that might move up on that Google findable list. So I hope you'll think about what you want people to see when they Google you. How can you build toward that, and what help do you need? So as a sidebar here, one of the things that worked for me in building was that I have something quirky about me. Not only do I write about women writers and Jane Austen, and I work on biography and nonfiction in particular, I also play roller derby. So these are things that don't seem like they would go together. And believe it or not, at first I thought that this quirky thing was a liability. I was worried that people would not take me seriously as a writer, an academic, as an author, a biographer, that they wouldn't take me seriously in the women's writing realm and the history realm and the literary history realm if they knew I did this other odd sport. I was wrong about that, as I came to realize people like it when equally okay, quirky things go together. And I learned more and more how to maximize the putting of those quirky things together because it's something memorable positively. Now, it might be that you do something quirky that's memorable negatively, and then you're in a bit of a different boat. But I think whatever it is, definitely try to think about ways to either pull in people based on the quirky things that go together, or to try to put to the side the quirky thing that you don't want people to know about you if they're looking for you as a writer. So finding your people is a really crucial part of the social media identity. You want to think about the keywords for the kinds of writing you do, for the genre, the topic, the audience. Choose a social media space at some point in the future and look for how those keywords are used. What patterns do you notice? Obviously, if you are already on Twitter or Instagram, you know some of these hashtags. Writing community, am writing, am reading. These things are very well used. They're very uh, widely proliferating hashtags. I'm hoping that you'll think more about narrower hashtags, where you'll find the people who are closer to you and your work. Again, for me, Jane Austen, Janeite, which is what Austen superfans call ourselves. These are examples of more narrow hashtags. Maybe there's something in a story you're working on or in a piece of nonfiction you're working on that would allow you to connect to people who may be interested in what you're writing now or in the future. These are the groups that I'm encouraging you to try to find. So these things will help you start to build a network. And then sharing and building a network is what comes next. I think it's really crucial that we start by listening. And I think this is hard because we imagine social media as pushing stuff out there. But I also encourage you to start by participating, listening, and being generous, sharing ideas. What do you bring that other people might care about that you could share? What are you reading? Boost something or someone you admire and say why. Say, I just learned. And if you can connect out to something or someone you've learned it from, even better. I'm sure there are other ideas that have worked for you, but what you're looking for here is to help other people see you appreciating them and being a part of something bigger. And hopefully, these are authentic things. These are not things you're making up. These are things that you really believe. And with any luck, in the future, when your time comes, someone who has been boosted by you will be willing to boost you in return. And this is like a networking online for writers. That is finding ways to hear others, appreciate others, in the hope that in the future you might too be heard and appreciated. So I think you should choose the social media involvement that aligns best with your writing or values your content. So the one way you could go here is go all in, be a little bit everywhere, yeah, and in that list of social media that I had. Another would be an eggs in one basket approach. And I don't know for you or your project what the right answer might be. People who are very visually oriented, who have image rich projects or writings might find Instagram to be much more to their taste. People who have tidbits to share, if you're working in nonfiction, Twitter might be much more your space. There are just lots of ways forward here. But whatever you do, I would encourage you to set a limit on how much time you are on it per day or per week. Often with myself, Facebook is something that I have enjoyed for years, but I have a limit for myself, and my limit is one post a day. I might go on more often and find things or find people. I try not to. I try to stay at my computer and do other kinds of writing, but I limit myself to a post a day, and that has worked for me and made sure that I'm not out there going in directions that take me away from what my main focus is, which is my writing. I think you should also study writer interviews, podcasts, and videos, and think about ways where you might succeed in those spaces and how you could up your game and up your skills. I was not always terrific at speaking off the cuff. I really am somebody who prefers to work off the script, but I've worked much harder, and especially I know all of us have over the past years, to be better with cameras, to be better with voice. These are things that you could train and get better at, and I would encourage you to do so. One of the reasons why that's important is because most writers serve as our own publicists and our own managing editors. If we all had publicists or we all had managing editors, we wouldn't need to be the ones who spoke eloquently about our own work. We wouldn't need to be the ones out there connecting. But that is not the case for most of us. Most of us need to be involved to some degree in creating the findable material about us and in what's called self-promotion. Now, personally, I think self-promotion gets a really bad rap. I think it's what we use when we are trying to tell people that they're being too loud or too out there. And so that bothers me. I don't find self-promotion to be a dirty phrase, but there are people who do. And I think when they are accusing someone of self-promotion for the right reasons, it's because it's somebody who's constantly blasting what they're doing without showing much interest in who's on the other side of receiving it. So one of the ways around this pitfall is to find a PR buddy or a circle of buddies and to help amplify each other and to help get the word out about each other. Now, this can't be, I think, inauthentic either. That is, you have to actually like each other's work and know each other's work in order to say, I just read this cool thing, or my friend so-and-so is doing this thing, and I want to tell you more about it. But you can work to boost each other's posts, even if it's only to like and to retweet on Twitter or to like and share on Facebook. There are ways that you can, when something important happens, when there's an achievement, big or small, that you can find ways to grow and build with each other as each other's PR buddies. So I encourage you to think about that. I know that many of you are in writers groups and you do this already with sharing your writing. I would guess that fewer of you are in social media PR groups, but these could operate in the same way. You could help each other, critique each other, and amplify each other. So to do this, I would encourage you to set goals. Which ideas seem like the most positive possible directions for your social media development? I've just thrown a lot of things out there. I know these are already things you're probably doing to some degree or thinking about to some degree. What would you like to do next to develop this part of your writing life? That is, to develop ways to share it more widely in digital spaces. I'd like you, as you go forward, to write down 3 goals, something that you're going to do this week, and after that, daily or weekly, something you're going to do this month, and something social media enhancing that you are going to do this year. And to give you examples, you might say, I'm going to be on Twitter for 10 minutes, attending to my professional writing life, 10 minutes a day. Something I'm going to do this month is I'm going to investigate how to do my own website on Weebly, or to start a brief blog on a WordPress site. These are things I'm going to do this month. And something enhancing that you're going to do this year, I'm going to think about getting some training as a speaker, or I'm going to write my own website content, or design my own website, or save up to hire someone to do one for me. These are the kinds of things that I would encourage you to think about in terms of this year content. I do my own website. I want to add that too. I do my own website. I got enough of the skills for what I need right now. And what I like about that is I'm able to maintain it, and I don't have to rely on somebody else to update it. Although I think many professionally designed websites are beautiful and more beautiful than mine. You are then in a situation where either you need to know how to update it yourself or you don't get to have updates. So thinking about ways to combine those things would also be wise. So setting goals is where I want to leave you thinking. Thank you so much for participating and thinking through this. If you're on Twitter, please follow me. My MO there is very much about following back. I really don't believe that Twitter is working for me as a space where I'm not seeking thousands of followers and having only hundreds. I'm really much more interested in access and connection. And I like looking at people's profiles and seeing that they have about the same number of followers as they do following. That says to me that they're there as a community, not as a blast. They're not looking to have lots of people love one thing, but not return the love. So follow me, I'll follow you back. Arrange for mutual follows with writer friends. This is something that happens all the time. You will start noticing these the more time you spend on your social media platforms. And again, give yourself a goal of deepening this for 5 to 10 minutes a day and see what grows out of that effort. Thanks again. It's great to talk to you about engaging social media for emerging authors, and hope you got something useful about all of this out of my conversation. Thanks.